Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Why Am I Talking podcast. I'm your host, Jonah, and today I'm going to be talking about Spike Lee's 1989 movie, Do the Right Thing. It's actually celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, if you couldn't tell from the date, meaning you suck at math. um, It was another movie I had to watch for my film class, and today I'm going to be talking about it. Yeah, do you hear that I just did? I'm going to be trying to do less of those this time, because I listened to the audio from my last podcast, and I said so many times, so I'm going to try and cut down on that this time. I did it again. See, it's just a habit. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to try. I'm going to ask all one of my viewers to keep me accountable here. So, Do the Right Thing. It's, I did it again. Did it again. It's Spike Lee's 1989 movie, like I was saying. Spike Lee, I've only seen BlacKkKlansman by him, but I was excited to watch this, and I ended up really enjoying it a lot. The synopsis, if I was going to give one, is essentially that it's the hottest day of the summer, and tensions boil on this one street, and things go poorly at the end of the movie. That's about it, and it's really it's about race, and really that's actually kind of the whole movie. It's about race, which Spike Lee addresses in a lot of his films. So I was pretty excited because I'm interested in his perspective on things, and BlacKkKlansman was really unique. So I was excited to see what this film was going to be like, because this is highly regarded as one of his best. So I'm going to start at the beginning of the movie with just literally the intro credits. I really enjoyed the intro credits. It's a bunch of people dancing to a hip-hop song. I don't know what song it is, but they're saying, like, fight the power, a bunch of times. And I didn't just enjoy the dancing, because I did. It was kind of fun to watch. It's a unique way to do intro credits, but the song sent a pretty powerful statement right off the bat. And I'm not going to be trying to dissect the politics of this. I'm not going to try and make any comments about race or anything, because I am a white man. I don't want to be assuming that I know something that I don't. I'm just going to be kind of discussing the statements that Spike Lee himself kind of clearly made in the movie. I'm not going to be trying to dissect that or anything, because I don't feel like I have any ground to speak on. I am a privileged white male. So, anyway, intro credits, pretty cool, pretty entertaining. Then it goes right into kind of showing this street life and showing the different people that live on the street, and it shows our main character, whose name is Mookie, and Spike Lee himself actually plays this guy. And he looks really young in this movie, and he has like a son and stuff, but I didn't actually know it was Spike Lee, like, until the end of the movie, and I went on IMDb, and I was like, wow, that was Mr. Lee himself. He was really young. I mean, he's 62 now, and since it was 30 years ago, that means he was 32 years old when it came out. Let me tell you, he doesn't look like he's 32. He looks like he could be a teenager. But we're introduced to our protagonist. I guess if you're going to call anybody our protagonist, it would be him, even though there's really no good guys or bad guys in this movie. I guess there are people who are kind of shitty people, but for the most part, there's a cast of characters, and if I was going to go with the main character, it'd be Mookie. So, right off the bat, one of the first things I noticed was the color scheme. Spike Lee really played with some bright colors in this movie. There were lots of reds and yellows and bright greens and blues, and it was really engaging to look at. And that I really enjoy when a movie plays with color that way, because it's so unique. Most of the times movies are I guess it's more of a artistic choice, because I find more often than not, movies are either really what's the name I'm going for? There's certain warm colors and cool colors. So usually it goes either cool colors or warm colors. And if it's warm colors, it's like a naturalistic warm. And with this, they kind of played with. There was a wall that was painted bright red that these guys sat in front of, and people's outfits were kind of zany and colorful, and I enjoy that. I enjoy a unique color scheme because it keeps you engaged with with what's on screen, like I was saying earlier. So then, after I noticed the colors, which is one of the first things that really came to my mind when I was watching it, just because it's so different than what you're used to seeing. Then it really jumps in pretty early onto race dynamics and kind of sets the tone with some outright statements about what's going on. So essentially, setting the scene here. There's a pizzeria run by these Italian white dudes. They're the only white dudes in the movie, apart from the cops. And they're a pretty popular joint. A lot of the people on the street eat there, and almost everyone who lives on the street is African American. And then there's a convenience store across the street from them that's run by, I believe, Korean people, but I don't know for sure what ethnicity they are. They're Asian people. So right off the bat, it sets what race is where on this street, and ends up playing into the dynamics of the plot all throughout. I mean, they're all very set in the stereotypes that you would expect, or not all of the African Americans are, but like the Asian people, they speak with the, exactly the kind of accent that you would expect to hear from. I mean, and again, Korean people running a convenience store is kind of already a stereotype. And then there's the Italian guys, and they're like kind of tough-spirited, they have the typical Italian accent, and they're very hard-headed, and they have like a picture of like Al Pacino on the wall and stuff, and that actually ends up playing into the plot later, believe it or not. But essentially, right off the bat, one of the first interactions that I saw that was interesting to me was one of Mookie's friends come in. I can't remember his name. He ends up being important. I'm just going to call him Glasses Guy because he wore glasses. And he comes in and he has like an argument with the store owner, whose name is Sal. The pizzeria owner, his name is Sal. He has an argument with him. He's like, there's all these white folks on the wall. Why aren't there any black people? You only serve black people here. Why don't you put some of our idols up there instead of Al Pacino, on the wall? And he ends up getting angry at him, and I can't remember when this conversation happens, but I remember specifically there was one quote I wrote down that came from Sal. He says, and I think it's a very obvious representation of race dynamics. He says, "I'm the boss," and then he's like, "This is a free country." Like, I think Mookie says that, and he's like, "Free? There is no free. I'm the boss here." And it's like totally a play on our history, sadly, that he would say that. He's like the white shop owner kind of kicking out these African American people, and then saying that. It was just kind of in your face, in my opinion, in your face right off the bat. This was like near the beginning of the movie, that then it really sets the tone for sort of the dynamics that are at play here. It was pretty cool scene, actually. And then there's this. Then everyone's trying to stay cool because it's the hottest day of the year. Actually, how we find out about it being the hottest day of the year is because Samuel L. Jackson is in the movie, and he like plays like this DJ who's got like a 12-hour talk show, I think, and he's actually he's one of my favorite characters, even though he doesn't show up a whole lot. But he runs this talk show that he almost narrates part of the movie at times, because he'll be like commentating on what he sees outside the window, like on the street. But it's the hottest day of the year, so everyone's trying to stay cool, and these people like open a fire hydrant. These two African American dudes open a fire hydrant, and they're like spraying people on the road, and like it looks like a lot of fun, actually. And then this guy comes by with this car. It's like this antique car, and he's like, "You better not get me wet." It's like, "Turn off that fire hydrant." They're like, "No." And then he's kind of a dick about it, like he doesn't believe them. And so then they actually just spray him down when he drives by, and the cops get involved. And at first, the cops are like pretty chill about it. And in that scenario, they're like, they don't really do anything. They kind of ignore the guy, kind of get mad at him. And he is a white man, I think. Yeah, if I remember correctly, he was a white guy. And that's our first time really interacting with them, but you can tell that there's still like this prejudice because they're like, well, what did you expect is kind of what they tell the guy, and that's just kind of messed up. But it was actually a pretty good scene. It was pretty funny and entertaining to watch, even though in reality nothing really happened apart from this guy got angry and then the cops came by. And yeah, there was a few scenes like that where normally it's a scene that I wouldn't have been as engaged by, but again, Spike Lee, the way he plays with color, and he uses the camera in pretty interesting ways sometimes, just to keep us on our toes. I really enjoyed. I remember I wrote that scene down specifically because I enjoyed it so much. But another thing about it is I enjoyed the score and the music, not just from the intro credits, but throughout the whole movie. I really enjoyed listening to the music they had playing, and sometimes that was source music because it'd be like, again, like Samuel L. Jackson's character would choose something to play on the radio, and then we would hear it as action was going on on the street. But other times it was just like this jazzy underscore that would be playing during like more serious scenes or like a sensual scene, and it was pretty interesting to say the least. So I'd say apart from the technical elements in those first couple of scenes, I have a lot to say about plot and characters, because there was a lot of really interesting characters that I want to talk about, and actually there's a couple other scenes that I'll get to that have to do with certain characters, and then of course I'm going to talk about the ending, because I have the ending is really cool, or interesting, I guess. Cool's not the word. It's very there's a lot packed into it, I guess. So I'm going to kind of start at the beginning here, right after that interaction with the police and the firefighter. This movie is told very episodic-like, meaning there will be a storyline we see like one scene from, and then we'll see a different storyline with another scene, and it's very slow moving for a lot of these people, but all together things kind of rise to a climax at the end through these intersecting storylines and different things that happen to people throughout the day. It's not very linear storyline, meaning one thing can happen and we'll cut to another person, and for all we know it happened at the same exact time that the last scene happened. So I'm just going to kind of cover a couple characters. Actually, you know what? That's a smart way to do it. I'm going to go through each character's day, and I'm going to kind of commentate on what happened during the day and discuss maybe things they did that I found interesting, and that's a good way to approach it. So Mookie, our main character, he's got a girlfriend and a kid, and he works for Sal. So he's the only black guy that works for the pizzeria, and he delivers for them. And you can kind of tell he's sort of a slacker, but he works hard, but like he'll take his sweet time doing deliveries, which, you know, whatever. It's like not a big deal. He's definitely working hard. I mean, especially on a hot day like that. What can you expect from a guy? But he's a very interesting character to me, because he's like this really friendly, sort of calm dude, but in the end he kind of makes a decision that sparks things off, which I'll get to, that I just wasn't really expecting, I guess, from him. But he's like the guy that knows everyone, and everyone likes him. Everyone's friends with him, except for like one of the sons who works at the pizzeria, doesn't really like him all that much. And so he starts the day, and he's got like a Michael Jordan jersey on, and then he throws on a Jackie Robinson jersey, and that's definitely not by accident. And he just sort of goes through his day working, and he juggles responsibility with family, and he sees some friends, talks to friends, and he really is just kind of there, witnessing more than doing anything during most of the day. Most of the day he's just sort of watching things like he sees something happen, or he has a conversation with someone, and he's delivering pizzas. So he doesn't have the most interesting day until the end. I'd say he sort of has a relaxed day. Like I guess he does have a few things he does, like one of the brothers, I can't remember his name, Pino, I think is his name. He's like his older brother Vito, who they're both people, the brothers who work at the pizzeria. He's like, if he talks to you like that again, just beat the shit out of him. Like, that's basically what he says, and it doesn't work. But he kind of creates this turmoil within the pizzeria, and he gets really mad at Sal because Sal's like hitting on his sister, and like I guess he doesn't really do anything. He just kind of like gets mad at people or I guess he gets mad at the people that work at the pizzeria, and he more than taking action, he just sort of creates. I guess he doesn't really create problems. He just kind of he deals with things throughout the day, sort of casually, because he'll like do this. He'll like have like a big argument, and then he's like right back to delivering pizzas, which I guess I kind of found funny at times. Like, he has like a shouting match with Sal, and then he like takes the pizza and goes and delivers it. I was like, wow, I would been like, screw you, dude. I'm not delivering this pizza for you. But that's just me. I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny at times. And maybe I'm missing some things about his character that maybe Spike Lee had intended for me to know. But again, I am a white guy. I wasn't digging too deep into it. I was just watching the movie for the entertainment value, and I was appreciating the message that Spike Lee was putting out there and the perspective he had on race, because I really do appreciate his perspective, and I agree with a lot of the things he thinks. And so, but that's not totally off topic. I just wanted to reiterate that, because this is a very culturally, wow, why can't I say that word? Culturally, you know what? I'm going to give up on that word. I'm going to say it's a race-sensitive film. Anyway, so Mookie, I will get back to him, because a lot of his biggest things happen at the end of the day. But he spends time with his girlfriend. He like puts ice cubes on her at one point to keep her cool. It's actually like a really sweet scene. And anyway, now I'm going to go to his best friend. I wouldn't call him his best friend, but his friend Glasses Dude from earlier. I cannot remember his name for the life of me. Actually, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't call him Glasses Dude. Maybe I should just look it up on IMDb and find out what his name is. I will do that right now. Here we go. Do the right thing. His name, Glasses Dude, is Buggin' Out. Okay, so I'm going to call him Buggin'. So Buggin', he's the guy that was like, why do we have Al Pacino on the wall? Like, and he was like, we need black people on the wall. You know, we're your customers. You should, you know, accommodate us instead of yourself. And he has a pretty bad day, I'd say. He at one point, like after this argument he has with Sal, and he gets kicked out. Like later on, this dude just like on a bike just like runs over his like new shoes and like scuffs them, his new Jordans, and he gets super mad at him. And it's a pretty funny scene, which uses all these there's these stock characters that they reuse throughout the movie that represent different communities, and there's this group of African American people that none of them have like individual dialogue as far as I remember, and they all just sort of have like this group reaction to stuff that happens, and they're just like, oh come on man, and they're like getting really mad at this biker and backing this guy up. They're like, you should beat him up. It's a pretty funny scene. And another thing about that scene that I just another point I wanted to get into, with the guy who ran over his shoe. He was wearing a Larry Bird jersey, and he was a white guy. And he's the only white guy wearing a jersey in the entire movie, and he's wearing a Larry Bird jersey, who is, by and large, one of the most famous white athletes in NBA history. Which I didn't think was an accident at all that he was wearing that, and that multiple people throughout the movie that were African American were wearing jerseys, and they were never wearing a white athlete's jersey. And I think that Spike Lee definitely did it on purpose. And it's just a random point that I wanted to point out. Maybe you've seen the movie before and you didn't notice, but I definitely did notice. So I got your back. But anyway, this guy has a terrible day. And then he's like going around asking people if they'll boycott Sal's with him, because he's like, man, this dude won't put up pictures of black guys, you know, and nobody listens to him. No, like literally, like nobody's on his side, and gets mad. that's a lot of his story, and but he does end up getting people on his side. That's literally the whole climax, is that he gets people on his side. But I'll get back to that because there's a couple other. Actually, there's really one other key character that I want to go to, but I'm going to talk about the stock characters again and sort of some of the stuff that they did. And there was a couple other smaller, minor characters that were pretty important. I'm just going to skim over them. So there's this, I don't remember their names either, but there's this old guy who's a drunk who walks around and kind of observes a lot of the things that are going on. And he gets harassed by these kids at one point because they're like, you walk around like you own this place. And he gets pretty upset about that because he's trying to support a family, and then they're like, well, it's your own fault, you walk around drinking all the time. And he was a pretty interesting character. I'm not sure exactly the point of his character. If I rewatched, I'm sure I could absorb a little more of his storyline. I was more focused on a couple other ones. His was one of the ones that I just sort of slipped through my conscience as I was watching. And then there was this old lady that he would talk to that they at first kind of start off as like enemies, I guess. They're like insulting each other as she leans out of her window. But then at the end of the movie, they both are like, wow, we're too old for this shit, basically. That's sort of like what I got out of where they ended up at the end. So there was those two, and then there's this guy walking around holding pamphlets for Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., I believe. And I think he has autism. It could be mental retardation, but I don't want to say for sure, but I believe he has severe autism. No, I think it might be mental retardation. I don't know for sure. I don't want to say in case you watch the movie and you do know. I don't want to assume that I do know. But he's got some sort of mental disability, and he's walking around handing these pamphlets out. And at the end, actually, I'll get back to him at the end too. I'm going to kind of bring all these characters together when I talk about the climax and what they each individually did, because it's all very interesting. But he's a very interesting character to me too, because actually I think his name was Smiley. That's what it was. It was Smiley, and he was just this friendly guy walking around handing pamphlets out and kind of talking about what Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X believe, which I thought was interesting. I would like to know what purpose there was for him having a mental disability. I don't know if there was a purpose or if it was just Spike Lee representing that community of people. Either way, I thought it was really cool that he was in the movie. I don't know if that guy actually is mentally disabled, but it was an interesting character, say the least. Is there anybody else I want to talk about that isn't stock characters? I feel like I'm missing people, but like if I don't remember them, I guess they weren't super important to me in my viewing experience. So now I'm going to talk about probably the most important character. I guess not. I mean, not a stock character. His name was Radio Raheem, and he is, in my opinion, the most important character in the story because of what happens to him, and I'll talk about that later. But he walks around with this gigantic jukebox, and he has it blasting all the time, and he's blasting just hip hop the whole time, and he kind of gets into some confrontations with people who are... Actually, you know what? That's really his whole plot line throughout the day, for the most part, is that he's getting into confrontations with people because his music's so gosh dang loud. And so, actually, one of my favorite interactions in the movie happens, or I guess not favorite, but one of the ones that caught my attention the most is he's walking by this group of Hispanic dudes who are listening to their own music on a jukebox, and his is louder than theirs. So they're like, "Oh man, what are you doing?" And he just kind of looks at him like, "What are you gonna do about it?" And because he's like a big guy, he's a pretty big guy, and Spike Lee makes sure to emphasize that because the camera's always below him, looking up at him, emphasizing his height and his large stature. And this one of the Hispanic guys comes down and turns up his jukebox and just kind of looks at him, and then he doesn't say anything. He just turns his jukebox up even more, and then Hispanic guy tries to overpower him. Doesn't work with his jukebox, and then like, fine, you win. And he starts walking away, and then the Hispanic guys just keep harassing him and like calling him names and walking after him. And to me, that was one of the scenes that set the racial tension, or racial dynamics between not just black and white, but the other, because he also had the Asian people, like I was saying, that they all seemed to kind of dislike each other, and they only liked people from their own race for the most part, apart from Mookie, who was friends with Sal and them, and a couple other people that were friends with Sal. But in the end, they all sort of turn on each other, which I'm going to get to. But first, before I do that, I want to talk a little more about Raheem. He ends up, he goes into Sal's, and he turns his music is up super loud, and Sal gets mad at him and makes him turn it off. And he wears these bracers on his knuckles that say love and hate. And after a conversation with Mookie, up to that point, we don't really know much about him. We think maybe he is kind of like this aggressive guy, because he seems to be really standoffish with people. But then he has this conversation with Mookie, and we realize he's just like this like docile guy who likes listening to loud music, and he talks about how these knuckle bracers, he says, like, love and hate like fight each other, and he kind of explains that love ends up winning in the end, and that, we realize he's just like this good guy. He's not, he's not a douchebag or anything. And so that, to me, is important for when I get to the climax. But before I get into the climax, I wanted to talk about a few of the other interactions between races that I noticed that Spike Lee definitely meant to be discussed. So I'm just gonna kind of commentate on them. I'm not gonna like make an opinion or anything, because I don't wanna be doing that as my races. I'm a privileged white guy. I mean, I think it's a discussion that should be had. I don't want to be pretending like my opinion is super important in this conversation. Anyway, one of the best scenes in the movie happens when, after Vito and Mookie get in an argument, and Vito, if you remember, he works at Sal's. They get in an argument, and then it cuts to Mookie standing on the street, and he just throws a bunch of slurs and insults regarding Vito's race at him, and then it cuts to Vito insulting Mookie and his race, and it's really bigoted, and just a lot of slurs are thrown out there. And then it cuts to, I believe, the Mexican dude, or I don't want to say Mexican, but Hispanic dude, who then starts insulting Vito again. And then it cuts to like the Asian shop owner insulting the Hispanic guy, and then it cuts to a police officer insulting someone else, and then it's just like these. It's really like they use a lot of horrible slurs and awful comments, but it's really like kind of out of nowhere and very in your face about it. Like I was saying, Spike Lee doesn't shy away from addressing these things in his movie, but on the surface, honestly, if you watch that scene with no context, I could. It's kind of funny. It's they're throwing out all these slurs, and it's definitely got a touch of humor to it. But lying underneath that is a very hard, cold truth that people actually like think these things about each other, and that these are all stereotypes that actually exist in society. And it was very interesting scene because, again, it's almost like we would think that it's funny, but it's not. It's not funny that people actually like think these things, and that they would be saying them at all is just sort of a tragedy. And that, to me, was a very representative of really the whole overarching message of this movie. And there's interactions where they're making fun of the Asian storekeeper, and he sort of has the whole annoyed Asian storekeeper like attitude about him, where he's like, like, you're gonna take what I give you. like this guy goes in for batteries once, and he just kind of throws a bunch of batteries in a bag and gives it to him. He's like, I don't think this is 20 batteries. He's like, you're gonna take the batteries, and it's a funny scene, but it's like it's so stereotypical, and you know that was definitely on purpose. Again, Spike Lee doesn't. I don't think he actually believes that there are storekeepers like that, and so anyway, there's all these interactions between people and between races, and it all boils together at the end of the movie, which I'm finally going to get into. And the end of the movie is our good friend, what's his name again? I already forgot it. Our good friend glasses guy, Buggin. Our good friend Buggin. He finally gets Radio Raheem on his side to boycott Sal's. He's the big guy who walks around the jukebox. And they team up, and then they get a couple other of the stock characters to join them, and they storm into Sal's as it's closing, and they just demand that the pictures be changed, and Sal ends up using the N-word, and he says a bunch of hurtful things, and then it turns into like a brawl, and they end up out in the street, and Radio is actually he's kind of pounding on Sal for a little bit, but I mean, he was very provoked, and he's not the only one doing it. And the police show up, and they choke out Radio. One of them chokes out Radio and ends up killing him. He ends up choking him for too long, and Radio Raheem dies right there and then. And it's very, very telling scene. It's it's sad, and it's that one cop. He obviously overreacted, and he took it way too far. No excuses for his behavior, but the other cop even was like, dude, he's had enough. What are you doing? And everyone's sort of freaking out. And then he's dead, and then they just sort of drag his body away and like throw him in the cop car, which is just so messed up. And I think if I'm going to do a character analysis here, I think that Radio, you know, I think the reason that he specifically is who Spike Lee had die at the end and had be the victim of police brutality is because he was seen as this aggressive guy, but we knew he really wasn't. You know, he had to be provoked pretty badly to actually take action against this guy, and he wasn't gonna kill him or anything. So I think that's the reason that he specifically was the target of police brutality, because he kind of embodied this awful stereotype that's often associated with African American people, because he was a large man and he wore these knuckle bracers and he blasted his music so loud. And so since he embodied that, him being the victim is very telling, I believe. I could be wrong. That's just, if I'm going based off a character analysis, that's why I would assume he's the one that got killed. And after that, things go really downhill. And it seems at this point, again, the movie's called Do the Right Thing, and at this point, nobody's done the right thing. I mean, Sal should not have gotten so angry at them, and they were making a fair point that they are the patrons, and so he should be, you know, accommodating them. But at the same time, you know, it's his culture too, that he wants Italian people up there. But, you know, his reaction was just so out of stock, or out of line. But then I would say that maybe violence wasn't the route to go from there, and so nobody's made the right decision. Now, I'm not going to say that anybody deserved what they got. Obviously, Radio should not have been killed there. It was horrible, but the violence maybe should never have been started in the first place. That's up for interpretation. You know, maybe, I don't know what some people would have done, but I personally don't believe that violence is ever the answer. And so things really spiral from there, though, once he's dead, and they're all just kind of standing there, all shocked in disbelief. And then of all people, Mookie goes and reaches back over this gate on the other side of the street. He leaves Sal's, and he grabs a trash can, and he throws it through the window of Sal's. And then things really go down, and everyone storms into Sal's pizzeria, and they start destroying things and throwing everything, and it ends up catching on fire, and so everything's burning, and Mookie probably should not have thrown the trash can because things really went to shit. I can understand it was an act of passion and anger. This man just got killed, and obviously that guy dying and Sal's place getting burned to the ground are not even close to being equivalent. But it seems like a poor decision regardless. Just from an outsider standpoint, that seems like not probably the smartest thing to do. And the police, obviously, so if we're going to go through the list of everyone's done the wrong thing. And then the firefighters show up, and the fire's going, and it doesn't seem like, at least when I was watching it, it didn't seem like they were being stopped from doing their job very much. But they end up turning the fire hose, like, on the crowd. And, like, what? Like, what was the point? Like, they made a horrible decision there. They just kind of panicked, I think, and they turned on the crowd. And even the firefighters didn't make the right decision, and they weren't even, like, a part of the situation. They were just there to put out a fire. And so, it ends up in, the riot goes on, and police end up showing up with, like, riot shields, and they have to hold back people, and it escalates really heavily. And then, once the fire's done, finally, our friend Smiley, the mentally handicapped person, he ends up coming. I guess he at some point made his way into like the back room of Sal's, and he just kind of sat there until the fire was over, I guess. And then he walks out, and all the pictures that Sal had on the wall of white Italian men are either burned or they fell off and broke. And he hangs up a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, which is very symbolic, I guess. And then the next day, it's all turmoil is over, and Mookie says he's going to collect his money from Sal, and so he heads down to the pizzeria, and Sal is sitting out there kind of feeling sorry for himself, and Mookie's like, well, you have insurance, like, what are you so upset about? And he's like, well, this was my home, I built this, like, this was my, I did this, I built this. And I don't know if you were supposed to feel sorry for him, because I really didn't, especially, like, at first I was like, oh, well, this poor guy's gonna have to, like, rebuild his restaurant or whatever, but he had insurance, so it's like, I don't know, like, okay, you lost your home, but, like, that poor guy lost his life, whatever, I don't know exactly what emotions we were supposed to be feeling there. But then it kind of ends with they have a discussion, him and Mookie, and it's sort of the message that I got out of the conversation, because it seems like they're having one conversation, but the meaning behind it something else. The meaning I got out of it was they were both kind of like, there's so many of our cultures clashing on the street, and why can't we just have my pizzeria here, and why can't we just have our different cultures live in harmony on this street? Why can't it just be that way? Why do we have to butt heads? Why did this have to happen? Why can't we just, accept each other? Is sort of the message I got out of it, because they reconcile and sort of both lament on the day before and are like, it's just a pity that it happened at all. And that's the meaning I got out of their conversation. And then it wraps up with Samuel L. Jackson sort of saying that the day is going to be hot again. And he says something or other, I can't really remember. And then it cuts out and it shows two quotes. And one quote is from Martin Luther King Jr. and the other from Malcolm X. And Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote is about how violence is never the answer, and Malcolm X's quote is about how violence can be the answer if it's self-defense. And I think he put those up there because there are two sides to it. I mean, obviously, self-defense is, one thing, violence is another thing. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could say they're the same thing. I guess the point of the Malcolm X quote was, like, he was saying, like, I don't even consider self-defense to be violence. And Martin Luther King Jr. was like, well, violence is never the answer. So I guess it's up to interpretation. I think that's the reason he put them up there, is you kind of get to decide for yourself who did the right thing. I think that's why the movie's called Do the Right Thing, is because at the end we kind of are left wondering, did anybody do the right thing, or did somebody do the right thing? And My personal answer, I don't think literally anybody made the right decision there at the end of the movie. I think everybody made poor decisions. Obviously, some were way, way worse than others. But everybody sort of had poor decision making there at the end. But it was a very interesting movie. I'm glad I watched it. I was very entertained the whole time. It had lots of humor, and it has a very powerful message, and it's a very unique movie, very Spike Lee-esque. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It made me want to watch more of Spike Lee's movies, apart from BlacKkKlansman, because I've already seen that. So yeah, I was. If you haven't seen it yet, I would absolutely recommend it. It's a very entertaining movie. I wasn't sure how much I was going to like it, just because of the premise didn't sound super exciting to me. I didn't really know how racially different it was going to be or anything. I heard the premise was it's the hottest day on a street, and I was like, that doesn't sound very interesting. And then it was obviously way more than that, like I've been explaining for the last 41 minutes. So, next I'm going to be doing Lady Bird, which is great. How do you say her name? I'm going to look it up on IMDb. Lady Bird. It's Greta Gerwig's movie starring Saoirse Ronan, and it's got Timothy Chalamet in it, who is maybe my favorite actor, so I'm really excited. I wanted to watch this a long time ago. I really started getting into movies after it was released, so I didn't get to see it during theatrical release, but I'm very excited to watch it now because I love Timothy Chalamet, and I've heard a lot of really fantastic things about it. So, it's been on my to-watch list for, God, I think longer than any other movie. I think I've just been putting it off for a while because I've had a lot of other movies I've been needing to watch, especially with my film class. But now I'm free. I'm going to watch Lady Bird. I will probably have the episode for that up tomorrow. I'm very excited about it. Hopefully I didn't say a million times in this episode. I've sort of drifted out, because when I start talking about a movie, I just sort of get lost in the conversation. So, thank you for listening. If you made it this far, I say that at the end of every episode, just because I don't know if anybody actually is making it this far. I'm enjoying doing this quite a bit. It's really enhancing my movie watching experience, because I'm looking for things that normally I wouldn't be looking for, because I want to be able to share them, and they're usually things that I would have to think about a lot to remember, but now they're sharp in my mind, because I'm like, ooh, I want to share that on the episode. This is only my third one, but I'm really enjoying it. I think I'm going to do it for almost every movie I watch from now on. I'm not going to do, like, big blockbusters. Like, I'm not going to do, like, Spider-Man, just because I feel like there's less for me to talk about. It's very enjoyable. Like, I love the MCU. Absolutely love it. I was like one of the first people to see Endgame. I freaking love it, okay? But I don't have as much to say artistically about those, because they are big blockbusters that don't rely so much on it, and I'm not a huge comic book nerd, so I feel like I wouldn't have as much input. I just would be like, that was amazing, and that would be all I could say. I could talk about a few cool things that happened, but that's just not my... I'd rather talk about these more creatively driven movies, I guess. That I'm not downplaying, the value of something like Spider-Man, because I thoroughly think it's a great form of entertainment. But anyway, yeah, I'm gonna be watching Lady Bird probably the next hour or so, and then I won't be doing an episode Monday, because Monday is my birthday. Woohoo! I'm gonna be 19. So fun. Actually, you know what? Before I end this episode, I want to say 19 is like the worst age. Like, nothing happens when you're 19. Like, from literally age 12 to 18, like, every year signifies something in your life. Like, 12 is you're going into middle school. 13 is you're finally a teen. 14, you can get, like, your driver's permit. 15, you can drive on your own to work and you can get a job and stuff. 16, you can like, work pretty much anywhere and you can fully drive, and you're really in high school at this point. And, like, 16 sort of like the sweet 16, like, it's just sort of like this iconic age. 17, almost as bad as 19, but it's not, because you're like, people are, I mean, at that point, you're like, you're past being like the typical teenager, like you're a little more mature when you're 17. 18, you're like an adult. You can vote, you can do all sorts of stuff. It's obviously a very important age. And then there's 19, and literally nothing changes when you're 19. You're still a teen, but you don't get any new privileges, and nobody like sees you any differently from 18 to 19. They're like practically the same age. At least when you're 20, you're no longer a teen anymore. You're a full-fledged adult. You're 20 years old. I don't know. It's just, this is like the lamest birthday ever. So, yeah, I'll be uploading Lady Bird tomorrow, and I will probably be deciding on my next movie after that. I have, again, a list of like 205 movies or something crazy, so I will be making quite a few episodes, and especially now that my class is over and I just have the rest of summer, I'll probably be watching a movie almost every day. So, thank you for listening. Again, I had fun watching Do the Right Thing. Definitely check it out. And I will see you guys next time.